My name is Fiona Moffatt. I am Assistant Professor at the University of Nottingham, and I think I'm here because I'm a physiotherapist, I'm a medical sociologist, but significantly I've been a collaborator with the CauseHealth Project, and also I've sort of worked alongside Dave with some of the projects and the books within the Critical Physiotherapy Network. And it's, you know, this area of evidence-based medicine and the evidence-based practice paradigm is a big interest of mine. So my role now is to build on and develop Dave's argument and problematize the EBM, the evidence-based medicine movement, a little further. And Dave has really eloquently opened our debate by constructing this sociological and philosophical critique of EBM. And he's argued that EBM is really far from the common sense and straightforward approach to clinical decision making and patient management that it was once set up to be. And instead it can be conceived of as this very political instrument, one that arguably obscures power interests by appeals to rationalism and these accompanying discourses that you know, alleged discourses that Dave mentioned of value-free, neutral and technical resolve. So my intent is to now further scrutinise some of the assumptions underlying EBM and further examine their implications for professional work and specifically for your patient. So Mikulovsky and Weir situate EBM really well for me. They describe it as this organising presence for clinical research within medical decision making. And I think this allusion to EBM as some kind of near spectral and pervasive presence is very relevant and significant. As clinicians, it's almost become part and parcel of how we're trained, how we practice, and even the clinical language and discourse that we utilise in our workplace settings. Put simply, it's become one of the most successful projects to influence our biomedical reasoning and practice. And in general, I think it's fair to say that this paradigm of EBM appears to have been greeted by a largely enthusiastic audience. And the spread of this evidence-based logic within healthcare has been considerable. Maya Goldenberg states, you know, EBM has a ring of obviousness to it, which makes it difficult to argue against. But, and there is, as Dave has pointed out, a very clear but, EBM is far more than a mere common sense approach. And to take this stance, as we've discovered from Dave's discussion, is to ignore a plethora of ideological, ontological, and epistemological concerns. So Dave has already started the process of unpacking the evidence-based medicine black box. He's exposed many of the taken for granted assumptions underlying EBM in order to inform wider debates about its usefulness, its impact, and its future. And he's problematized the EBM movement as the standardization of health services and the penetration of market logics within a healthcare setting. If you like, what we might refer to as the McDonaldization of clinical practice, where evidence-based guidelines are viewed as part of the neoliberal agenda. If you like, a collection of techniques and practices that are intended to provide a new approach to dealing with biomedical knowledge and authority, rendering it explicit, codified, and significantly open to bureaucratic scrutiny and control. And this reflects that kind of loss of trust that Dave mentioned earlier. But can we honestly argue that EBM has been a successful Trojan horse for public sector managerialism and the regulation of professional experts? Well, within the general sociology of the profession's literature, there is actually very little empirical evidence that medical autonomy has declined in response to any neoliberal transformations within healthcare. And in fact, some authors have argued that the EBM movement has essentially been professionally and quite strategically harnessed, possibly viewed as a radical strategy for professionals to fight back, potentially utilising what we might refer to as the science of EBM as a professional project to reassert and re-legitimise their own professional autonomy and authority. There is also actually very little empirical evidence to suggest that the EBM movement has made the sort of fiscal savings that might have been anticipated if cost control were its true intent. So there seem to be a number of holes in this argument that render it problematic. And I think one of the central issues is that the EBM movement tends to conflate the idea of guideline and protocol, or conflates EBM purely with the idea of guideline and protocol, and actually attends insufficiently to another critical element. And this critical element of EBM is above and beyond a purely political argument. And for me, it's about the knowledge relation. So EBM embodies this conjoined relationship between science and clinical decision making. So it isn't simply about a doctrinal assertion of formulaic guidelines. There is, if you like, the intent that there is some clinical translation process. So for me, exploring this conjoined relationship would appear to be a far more productive venture. What exactly is the nature of that relationship? When and if and how could abstract epidemiological knowledge ever become evidence to inform individual clinical practice with that one person, that one patient sat in front of you? So let's explore this relationship, this conjoined relationship from the perspective of this healthcare professional. How does this physio take probabilistic rationalities from randomized controlled trials and attach that to her tacit knowledge and her clinical experience, and specifically her socio-cultural knowledge of the individual patient that she treats there? So let's think about how our physio understands and comes to value what we think of as evidence. Healthcare professionals' ontological and epistemological assumptions of what constitutes knowledge or evidence varies really widely. Put simply, there's these kind of notions of best evidence and methodological rigor are intensely socio-political constructs, which are, as we know, widely contested. Evidence is quite simply in the eye of the beholder. And I think a neat example of this is seen in a study of Australian doctors and nurses by Broom et al. And the authors claim that specifically the nurses' discourse around evidence-based practice demonstrated this really complex dialectic between, on one hand, the need for a science-based legitimacy, but on the other, a need to preserve certain values and beliefs that actually embodied their professional identity of nursing, their kind of mandate or their license to care. And ontologically, the nurses were far more likely to perceive ill health as a subjective lived experience, and therefore epistemologically were drawn to qualitative data and patient narratives as legitimate sources of knowledge. And this, I think, links really nicely to Dave's comments earlier about, this kind of need to return or to remember our professional roots of healthcare and caring. So let's now situate the patient, the person, properly in this account, because this essentially is the business end of evidence-based medicine. And Dave has already questioned whether the assumptions inherent in evidence-based medicine can ever adequately accommodate person-centered care. And if we take a humanist and a phenomenological perspective, we would see that those individuals, those movements have constructed a staunch critique of evidence-based medicine, claiming that it essentially erases any form of human experience. So they would claim that EBM subordinates patient-centered care to goals that have not been agreed through due democratic process. They would challenge why relevant evidence is assumed to come from clinical trials and other objective measures. And they would argue instead that the patient's own understanding and their own experiences are just as legitimate sources of knowledge. And in failing to acknowledge this, EBM risks ignoring the existentiality of illness. And this is really important because, after all, we know that non-somatic components, you know, the subjective experience of illness, are absolutely critical to how somebody experiences the illness, experiences the medical encounter, and their subsequent recovery. So, as Dave has already set up, you know, can EBM ever respond to this? Can it ever bridge the divide between measure and meaning? And the consensus opinion seems to be that, you know, maybe what we need is an integrated model of evidence, but one that is attentive to and reflects much wider academic traditions, including, importantly, the humanities, so philosophy, social anthropology, sociology, as well as much more diverse notions of what constitutes evidence. One suggestion might be that we adopt a more postmodern perspective and look at a more positive theory of power, something that constitutes rather than erodes the subject. And the Foucauldian concept of governmentality offers a potentially useful heuristic framework. It avoids overt dichotomies such as power and subjectivity, and instead sort of offers a much greater vista of opportunities and practices. So Foucault describes two distinct components to the art of governing. These are the rationalities and technologies of government. So rationalities are sort of basically the knowledges that claim the status of truth, and technologies are the forms of intervention for operationalizing those. So if we think about these in terms of what the discourses of evidence-based medicine do in practice, we can use these to see how professionals and patients become co-opted into this EBM regime. So the stepping off point for the discourse of EBM is that healthcare quality and efficiency just has to be improved. And this is essentially the process of problematization in which formalized knowledge is evaluated relative to certain norms. The next rationality implicit within this paradigm is that population-based information is relevant to all. So this is operationalized by technologies such as the RCT and knowledge syntheses, in which knowledge is privileged according to a very biomedically driven hierarchy of evidence. And with evidence-based medicine, rationalities are codified and explicit rather than more tacit and indeterminate, as Davis suggested we require. And of course, there's this rationality of EBM, which lends itself so well to guidelines and formulas. And the final rationality here, and it's a really significant one for us as contemporary practitioners, is that evidence-based practice has become a professional duty. And this is achieved by its overt linkages to clinical governance requirements, so that prevailing EBM discourse is such that it creates a cultural, social framework in which healthcare professionals seem to be compelled to refashion their identity as evidence-based practitioners. And as such, they adopt self-directed and self-governed practices such as reading and implementation of guidelines, research training, and critical reflection. And the key here is that this emanates from the governed subject. It's actually not top-down command and control, but a much more subtle form of governance. But so far, this account has just considered the professional. What impact does it have for our patients? And the contemporary move has seen the mandate of evidence-based medicine more obviously extend to the patient via the use of things like shared decision-making tools. And this, in essence, serves the purpose of making the patient much more complicit with the evidence-based medicine approach, based on the rationality that they have sufficient agency to make a rational choice. So does this mean that the evidence-based medicine movement is starting to look a bit more person-centred? Is our patient truly a co-collaborator in this process of evidence-based care, someone that has significant agency rather than a passive recipient? Well, of course, the answer is no, not really. They've had no say in how that knowledge is collected and reified as evidence. They've had no input into the subsequent interpretive processes undertaken by healthcare professionals or professional experts. And it's unlikely that they've had a role in selecting the range of management choices on offer via these shared decision-making tools. And while certain basic preferences may be accommodated, it's unlikely to fully reflect the full extent of the individual patient's experiences, values, and beliefs. So in fact, our patient is left with a very limited menu of choices, which is still presided over by the healthcare professional as referee. As such, it's much more of tokenism. The model doesn't permit the patient sufficient agency with which to truly assert influence as anything more than that passive recipient of care. And their humanistic properties that could potentially have an evidential influence in decision making are still not accounted for, even in this new and improved paradigm of evidence-based practice. So as I draw to an end, I just want to reflect on where that leaves us. Dave and I have problematized many aspects of the EBM paradigm, and yet we have barely scratched the surface of the contemporary sociological critique. Now, our critique, I don't think, is intended to be an exclusively negative one, but rather one that promotes a much more meaningful discussion around evidence-based practice. It's highlighted the implications for professionals and patients, and I hope that we can perhaps now create a space in which we can consider opportunities to better reposition both within this complex movement or whatever comes next, whatever we use to replace this. So we're now nearly 30 years into the EBM movement, and the combination of the passage of time, and I think, or I hope, the contribution from social science and the humanities has permitted us sufficient perspective with which to now move this paradigm on. And I think there are some big questions for us to ask. I think we need to think about how should we know and how should we value knowledge and data? How do we apply what we value as knowledge and data to the patient, given all the other things we know about that individual sat in front of us? But significantly, how do we represent our patients and their human experience within all of this? Thank you.